Hiya, this is Kitten Features, and you're listening to Show X Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to Show X Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado.
Hey, wait a second. I'm on the show too, and I don't get any billing at all? Well, I know how to solve this. Soldater, Fremad, March! You're listening to Show X with our favorite Scotsman Ken, our child of the corn Wayne, currently living in Colorado, and Todd, who now has an army of angry Norwegians at his back. Enjoy the show!
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the show. Oh, whoops. Oh, the camera is
falling. Yeah, the camera's falling.
It's like, what did you do? You just tape me up here all of a sudden? How dare you? I'm not going to... It's like, well, it's been facing other ways. Anyhow, you're listening after, admittedly, 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT on this Sunday, the 1st of August, 2021.
Where'd July go?
It is in the past, and it is no more.
What will it be now?
So, we have another show today where the guys are busy in life and other adventures, but to help sharpen the show and give us something wonderful to talk about, we have good friends Jon and Beck Wasik in on the show today with a preview for you guys of one of the projects that Jon's has had in the works for a bit now.
Quite a while.
And is ready to come to fruition.
Ah, yeah.
So let us get things going with that. Actually, let's see. Ooh, this
camera's
it's going to make me mad if it keeps doing that. So I'm going to look. I'm going to try to find the right button, like the right one to pull, and not break everything else to say. If I pull this, what do I break? Okay, good. That shut that off, which hopefully gives me a little more bandwidth there. It's being a butt.
Aww.
But we will see. Oh, I can kill it completely and then see if it comes back. Anyhow, as I deal with technical difficulties aside, welcome to the show, guys. How you doing?
Thanks. Yeah, good. It's
crazy.
Sunday. It's Sunday. Hi. Yeah.
It is Sunday.
I'm losing track of every day.
You know, it happens. We've run into that more and more with, I would say, this kind of, what do I want to say? With everything that's gone on and how it continues to, like, hit us, and we come back and things change and whatever like that. It doesn't surprise me when everyone is in a little bit of state of like, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, foggy brain syndrome.
Pretty much.
All right, let's see if my camera decides to behave again.
Wakey camera.
I really don't want to have to switch to the other one camera. It'd be so unfortunate.
Yeah.
Actually, you know what I'll have to do? I'll have to come in here, hit the button, tell it I don't want to use that thing. I'm going to use something else, I swear. Let's see. And then see if I can come back and kick it again. Oh, see? Yep. Sure enough. No, see, it made it really mad.
Yeah.
It's like, see? What are you trying to do? But, oh well.
I sympathize. I've used this program quite a bit too these days, and yeah, it can fight. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it fights.
I think we're just gonna have to deal with me being a bit choppy today, everybody. Hopefully, that's not too distracting.
Indeed.
Sorry about that. I'm not gonna look at the stream. It's there. You can see it. So hopefully, we will continue and press forth. All right. So I had to give like full disclosure ahead of the show today. Was trying to decide if we were going to have one or not coming in, mostly because kind of last minute co-hosts were still busy, not able to make it, and so I was like, all right, do I just do it or not? And then the Wasiks were kind enough to kind of say like, oh, we're out and about adventuring. Could we stop by because I do have a 3D print to give to Beck? And so I was like, well, could you bring your book? And do you have a little bit of time?
Yeah.
And so this is kind of a quick shot out of the blue, let's go kind of show, but we will get it done. All right.
Well, it's appropriate too, because my very first published book I came on the show. That was my first podcast, first interview, for a lot of firsts with this show. So it feels appropriate that the beginning of a new series, I should be on the show.
And I very much appreciate you guys coming on to share with us. So, in the past, you guys have seen from Jon on the show that we had talked about his Sword of Dragon series, which is, 4 books in that one now?
3 in the main series plus a short story anthology, and yeah.
Yeah, so the 3 main storyline books and the Orc War campaigns
yes.
as the short story book in that one. And so that's what you'd had from us in the past, as well as Beck's been on to share yours, which originally the... Oh gosh, off the top of my head, it's funny because I just found one of your cards.
Yeah, just like the original business card that was coming soon. Oh.
Yes, the bloody notes from that you had brought on as well. Because your first book was Bloody Notes, and the second one,
Chaos Rises.
Chaos Rises, and what's that series?
The Leviathan Mysteries.
Leviathan Mystery series.
Steampunk series set in late Victorian London. So.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so kind of catching everybody up on why you have seen them in the past, seen them before.
Indeed.
So, but now you're on to a new storyline. So, Sword of Dragons was very much a fantasy and magic-filled world that you created in that one. Mm-hmm. Introduce us, if you will, to this new series, Chronicles of the Sentinels.
Chronicles of the Sentinels. Let's see if I can get it up on screen there. Yes. It's urban fantasy. Think Dresden Files or the Guild Codex series that I am still in the middle of reading. I love that series. I just finished Dresden Book 17, by the way, like this week.
Wow.
Holy crap, Jim Butcher. Really?
It's curious because I've just been reading the Codex Alera series that admittedly Ken got me into, because when we had first started talking about Jim Butcher as an author, I was all into the Dresden series, reading through those, and he hadn't read any of the Dresden, but he'd read Codex Alera. And so we were both trying to compare notes a little bit. And it's funny because for me, getting into the Codex series, he doesn't let you breathe. It's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah.
It's like, never is there really a dull moment.
Not really. I've read the first book in that series. It seems like these days my interest is leaning more towards urban fantasy because I like Dresden more. But kind of an interesting segue. The differences you kind of see and feel in those, you can kind of get with Sentinels too. It is completely different. I mean, it's still fantasy there, and there's a dragon in it. She's a foot long. You know, she literally sits on your shoulder. But
she's a tiny, adorable thing, and I love her.
Nice.
But, it actually takes place in Denver. I think my voice just...
No, that's me. That's me.
Okay,
You go.
cool.
You're good.
I was used to hearing myself for a second. But yeah, starts in Denver. It's a trilogy. Well, the trilogy is the start of the series. I've already got more books I'm working on for the entire saga. This is going to be a lot longer than I originally planned. But, how long ago was it? When I started my blog in 2014, I came up with the original idea for this trilogy. Wrote a book, and then got some quality, blunt feedback on it from some writer's critique groups. Set it aside, decided to publish my Sword of Dragons books, and now I came back to this, rewrote not just the first book, but I wrote the entire trilogy in 2020. That's what I did through pandemic, was the entire trilogy.
Nice.
So it's written, and also some exciting news is this is the first time I've ever commissioned an artist for custom artwork for the cover.
So what you guys are seeing on the screen, both what he's holding up and what I have in the actual on the show itself, is the cover for the first book, Legacy. And it's got a great look to it.
I love it. This guy did amazing.
You went through a couple of people until you found just the right one.
I had some kind of wish lists of, that would be awesome if I could get that artist, and I sent them emails asking, hey, can you do this? Here's my idea. What do you think? They both were interested. One of them being Dan Dos Santos.
Okay.
Who has done the Marcy Thompson series.
The big downsides with both of the artists that I approached at the beginning, there was 2, but the biggest was that they were booked for over a year. Both of them.
Wow.
I'm like, I want to get this out sooner than that. They were also pricey, very understandable. Especially once I calculated out, like Dan Dos Santos, he told me how long it would take him for most projects. how much he charges, and I like did the math, and I'm like, he's making about the same amount I am per year. So I do not begrudge him.
For Dan, we thought his artwork was digitally done. And we started following him on Instagram, and we find out that all of his paintings are actual oil paintings.
Wow.
They are physical pieces that he is making, not just digital. So yeah, considering the price for that.
And the speed. I think he said it would take him from initial contract to completion 6 weeks, I think it was. That's fast.
That is pretty quick, especially for
oil.
Well, because I imagine with any artwork design you're doing, right, you don't just get it quite in one shot.
Yeah.
It takes some iterations, because I know for me with almost any covers, and we talked about it before with the Sword of Dragon series, because I remember, in fact, I think I have, the first like covers of, which were good covers, very direct and just kind of more of a feel and kind of look to them. But something that I see in a lot of book series you have, especially with science fiction, fantasy, things like that, is when you have this creative artwork that often gets included with the books, that they depict something of import or perspective from the story, the characters, the world, something going on. Mm-hmm. And so I can only imagine what that process must be to kind of come up with, one, what I'm assuming may be the image of a main character, the main character, something like that,
yes.
Visually, because that's a big piece, because anything you're putting on cover art is going to be added or assumed to be, canon for how it looks. Indeed. For what the world is actually depicted as, for what the author must also believe the world should look like. And so how is that process involved with both, one, finding, like you said, the artist to kind of bring you into and to create your artwork for it, but also the communication back and forth of what you were trying to convey from the story? Because I'm assuming the author didn't get the book, read the whole book, and then try to start drawing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And creating the image, but some process there. So what was that like?
So it ended up being that it was funny that I had read on a website, don't use Fiverr.com, they're scams and stuff. And then I posted my woes on Facebook, and I immediately got responses of, use Fiverr. Like, So I did my research, and I found that there were some scam artists on Fiverr.com, but really all you have to do is kind of take a cursory look at their profile, and you're like, that's suspicious. So I finally found 2 or 3 artists that looked good, settled on one, initiated contact with him, and this guy was enthusiastic from the moment. I told him what the book was about, what I wanted for the cover art, or my ideas for it, and he was enthusiastic. I
think, to say the least, he was very...
Yeah, he was
all about this project.
So that's got to feel really good. Mm-hmm. It's one thing to have to go and really to try to find someone that you like the style of artwork, you like what they're doing with it, but 2, to kind of include in there, are you really going to care about my project? This is something that is mine, that I want out there, that the whole world's going to see. And it's essentially, you're going into kind of a shared or joint project in that point, where not only is it representative or something everyone's going to see when they pick up your work when it comes to what you've written, but it's going to be a reflection of their artwork as well.
Indeed.
And so there's a pairing there. There's a kind of marriage that happens with, you want both to succeed in that way. And so I can imagine how for each of you coming into it, that agreement or kind of figure out what you're going to do, it's got to feel really good when someone's showing enthusiasm and saying like, oh yeah, this is something I want to be part of.
Definitely. And what I did end up doing is the cover depicts an early scene in the book. So I described it to him, and then he asked me, hey, can you send me the pages that scene takes place in? So it was 2.5 chapters worth of material I sent him.
Okay.
And he immediately came back after he read it, was like, oh my god, I love this, I want to read this story, but most of all, I already have a clear picture of what to do with this. And so then we negotiated contract terms, and then he sent me the contract through Fiverr.com.
Nice.
And I agreed to it, which initiated the job. I was actually blown away that he said he could have it done in, I think, 10 days was the initial contract. I'm like, that's fast, dude. I was like, but we'll see. I mean, his artwork, because he had tier levels of, pay this much, you get this kind of quality artwork.
Okay, quality, time involved, maybe like assets that come from it. Because admittedly, with Fiverr, we did the same thing essentially for the logo that we use in the show.
Yeah.
We went to Fiverr and I chuckle when you mention that about people perhaps dissuading you or giving you caution as to whether it was a resource worth diving into. Because I know for me, we were like, well, I know various artists, right, in general, but logo designers,
Yeah.
I don't know, right? It's a specific thing. And so I have only in my own history, we've used Fiverr, and I've done really minor work with either people I knew, or actually I think the first artist I ever commissioned was someone off of DeviantArt that I had found. And it was for a martial arts symbol that we were wanting to use for a shirt, kind of thing that we really liked. And so that process to me is really interesting. And so I'm happy to hear finding success via Fiverr, because I can see people being leery of the service, that yes, anybody could create a Fiverr account, basically. Anybody could say, I'll do something for you and charge for it, but you don't know what you're really going to get. But I found quality, and I like that. It seemed to me good Fiverr accounts had a portfolio to reference that you could see, and like you said, the tiers of the kind of work you could expect to get, timelines. You could kind of tell professionally someone who's done it before when they have all that information that I'm going to want to know if I'm about to spend money on you.
Yeah.
And if they already have that listed, it's like, okay, that's the person I can trust to go to.
Yeah.
So that's good to hear.
Yeah, and he, I went for his highest service because I wanted the best quality, and it had to be completely custom. You know, I didn't want stock art or anything.
Yeah, no worries about like copyright or other issues, or heaven forbid, looking at some other book or something out there and saying like, that looks oddly familiar.
Yeah.
I remember looking for stuff for the steampunk, going through my steampunk, and seeing the same stock art woman on like every single self-published piece, and I was like, well, I don't want that.
See, I think what you just told me is I need to minorly go on my own as a side hustle and do a whole bunch of like legit stock art steampunk shoots that are specifically just to be like, this is steamish punkish. This is steamish punkish at a factory on a hill, and just create stock art, because it sounds like there must not be enough.
There really is.
There's a market for it. You joke, but I think you actually could make something out of that.
That's funny, because I know there's a whole genre that is just steampunk, and while it's a minor compared to mass fiction,
right?
There's a lot of steampunk out there. So that's kind of funny.
It's weird that there's that much steampunk out there, and yet it's not mainstream, quote unquote. Well, like, that's weird, because it should be at this point.
Well, you say that. You know, this is one of those interesting things, and I think this is a challenge we all run into when we find things that we love, that we embrace, and we follow, that we know why they speak to us, right? Why it's so easy for us to consume and say, this is awesome, I love this thing. That it's sometimes hard to understand, to step back aside and see, why doesn't everybody love this thing that's so obviously great?
Yeah.
And I say that when it's certain video games that I enjoy, or books I've read, or anime I've watched, things like that, where I'm kind of like, but this is amazing. Everybody should have seen this by now. And to find that people don't, it's just like, well, why not? And so I wonder that about steampunk, because those who are in it are in it.
Yeah.
Right? And then I can see where a lot of people have never been exposed.
Well, and also, I think it doesn't help. I thought that, for instance, Wild Wild West, the Will Smith remake, was decent, but
in its own right.
In its own right, it was decent, but it really wasn't a good portrayal of steampunk, and I think it turned masses off from steampunk, because they thought that's what steampunk is, giant spiders. I'm like,
I wouldn't
not necessarily.
Well, because that's the thing. I wouldn't have even classified Wild Wild West as steampunk myself. It has elements.
It's Western steampunk.
Yeah.
Because you've got like different
like
genre.
Yeah, and so that's
genre within genre.
No, it makes sense. It's like anything, right? It's when you come from a sci-fi perspective, but you add an element or go outside the norm with it and do something twisted with it. I argue that for one of my favorite authors of all time, my favorite series, Dragon Riders of Pern. Because for anyone, spoiler alert, I guess.
For a 30-year-old series.
Yeah, if you haven't read Dragon Riders of Pern, one, you're wrong. But two, it's a fantasy sci-fi.
Yeah.
Because it starts fantasy and it builds a completely medieval-based fantasy world that progresses into hard sci-fi in the sense of technology and more.
Yeah, by the third book of the original trilogy, you're like, oh.
Yeah, and it opens up the whole concept.
Colonists.
And so it's like a twist on traditional kind of themes or genres of fiction. It's interesting. Like I said, Wild Wild West. Yeah, it's the Western-esque version of a steampunk because it has the technology kind of flair. Yes.
Yeah.
Because admittedly, I think of steampunk as
a little bit of the fashion, but that kind of also all depends on what a person like fancies for the fashion, because fashion can be anywhere from the skimpy outfits that are kind of typical of saloon girls in that series.
Yes.
Versus the full-blown Victorian garments.
Which is what I traditionally think of, the more Victorian European version. And honestly, I mean, that's kind of what you get anyways. It's the most steampunk is usually built around Elizabethan, European, old, historic kind of views where there's the idea that technology progressed, right?
Yeah.
Boom. And so it's interesting to see it in a Western perspective, let alone any. And so that's funny. But yeah, no, you're right. So, all right, John, I want you to bring us into the world as we're talking about various genres of books of where you place the Chronicles of the Sentinels. You mentioned earlier a little bit about the urban fantasy, urban kind of aspect. Well, could you tie us a little bit more directly into where, when, what kind of universe is this taking place in?
So it takes place in, I mean, this universe, except magic isn't real in our real life. Dang it! But it takes place. I didn't think of this initially, but about 4 years from now ish, basically after the next presidential election, so I didn't have to worry about who's president. And it takes place here in Denver. Magic is real, but 4,000 years ago in ancient Babylon, a group of mages got together to create the ultimate enchantment, to create the barrier, which surrounds the entire planet and blocks all magic from existing on Earth. And the reason they did this is a god, Marduk, who is a Babylonian god, was consuming human souls and needed more and more and more, and they were afraid that he was going to, break free from wherever he was off the Earth, because he could only influence Earth through his half-god, half-human son, Naboo. Nabu, not the Star Wars planet. So they erected the barrier to block magic and founded the Sentinels to, because the barrier's imperfect, there's cracks, magic seeps through. The more magic is used when that happens, the worse the cracks get. So the Sentinels, for the past 4,000 years, their mission has been to keep the barrier from getting worse.
So basically, it's like Earth's TVA, but not for a timeline.
Kinda, yeah.
Spoiler: he was writing all of this way before Loki came out. So me, that's just doing an analogous or to the breaking of the timeline that we see in Loki. But yeah. But basically, the special group of people there to maintain the barrier against magic, thus I'm assuming it sounds like to keep Earth somewhat off the radar, or more is it to keep minimize the god's ability to draw those souls, like to create so you can't even do that?
Both, but pretty much the biggest thing is, the Marduk cannot touch the Earth with the barrier up because Marduk is a being of pure magic. Spoilers for book 2 as you find out more about what he and the other gods and stuff are.
Essentially that there are.
Yeah.
Spoiler that there are.
Okay. But, fast forward to today, and the protagonist, Christopher Tatsu, Japanese-American, just finishing up college, gets caught up in this... how much do I say without giving away too much of
Don't spoil it. Just to give us a little bit of tease of what does the reader come into, starting into the series, finding where is Chris... And, who is Chris at the beginning?
He's an engineering student, doesn't get along too well with his parents, doesn't really like the direction his life is taking, but he is pursuing it because he's an all-or-nothing kind of guy. And he has started to have these weird recurring dreams. The beginning of the dreams always start out as something different. The dream we see in Chapter 1 involves him seeing... deserts, sands, and then a mysterious, beautiful anime-like girl, elf-like girl.
Okay.
In his dreams, and then it goes to a part where he always sees it, which is a golden sphere of energy and his sister, who had previously passed away. And he sees her every time. It happens the same way every time, and he wakes up only to be shocked that for the first time ever, something from the dream came to the real world.
Oh.
And he's like, this can't be. And of course, a man who's an engineer, a scientist for all intents and purposes, suddenly is like, this can't be real.
So a
Totally
protagonist
denied.
who's coming from a perspective who has grown up in what we today would arguably say know the world to be. That the rules of the world, physics, and everything that are how we perceive them on Earth right now. To have to deal with suddenly basically forced into dealing with a situation where all of my logic and all of my understanding of the world cannot explain what is happening now.
Indeed.
And having to, assuming that someone in an engineering field tends to look at it from a perspective of, this is the way the world works, and I am helping fit and build things within this and solving problems within these rules, right? And usually how I see an engineer as a whole is, I solve problems based on how the world works.
Exactly.
But usually from kind of a physical perspective. So interesting. Excuse me. So I'm assuming we get there then, some of his coming to understanding, fighting with, dealing with that like thrust into the life all of a sudden, things aren't what I always knew them to be.
Indeed. Yeah, and he struggles to come to terms with that while also being, it's like, what would you do if there was, for just an example, suddenly proof that magic exists? How do you deal with that?
Gotcha.
It's in your face. There's no denying this, and yet it makes, it can't make sense. So that's part of his struggle, while also his, life kind of comes under threat for various reasons. And also, believe it or not, choosing Denver was only partly because, this is where I live.
Because it's easy to write locations and spaces and stuff, because it's like, oh, you mean there?
Yeah. That was definitely a factor. But as I started to read, like, mythology and occults, because initially I was thinking Egyptian mythology, but then I'm like, nah, that's been done to death. I mean, I love Stargate, but it's been done to death.
No pun.
So I came up with Agent Babylon, and then I started looking into trying to figure out the magic system in this book, because I didn't want it to be a repeat of the Sword of Dragons. I wanted it to be something completely unique and different.
Nice.
So, And come to find out that, according to a lot of occult theories, Denver is a convergence of ley lines.
Oh, interesting.
And it like, as soon as I read that, I'm like, it clicked in my head, because there's a bunch of cracks in the barrier that can converge here, and therefore Denver is an important place in the magic world, and that's why this has to take place here. I'm like, yes, I love it when a plan comes together.
Nice.
So, oh yeah, it was exciting moments like that. I'm a nerd writer. I get excited about that.
Well, it makes sense. It obviously makes sense for me to focus on things that you find interesting anyways, and that you would hopefully therefore imagine, go back. I mean, it's always back to, young geek me, nerd me, when you learn about a new concept of something, like the first time you read certain fiction stories, see a movie or something, the first time you see Star Wars, that kind of thing or something, to be able to be tied into or introduced to someone else's imagination of the way things could be, of a world, of characters and the type of interactions they can have, there's no question that then turns around and influences everything then I perceive in the world and how my imagination floats. Like, it's the whole thing of, like, what kid didn't pick up, jokingly, right, the past, a flashlight at some point in their childhood and whip it around thinking it could be a lightsaber. Right? Everyone's done something like that. So I think it's really interesting to try to come up with and introduce twists or unique ways of looking at fiction, at the rules of the universe. We've talked about in the past before how I think it's super important to focus on rules of a world, because my reading is always about, yes, characters and plot are probably important. However, I geek out and I find myself focused or really imagining the lay of the land, the rules, the interactions of, like, politics and mechanics in the world. To me, that often is interesting, because that kind of transports me into how a person would live in an entirely different world. And that's something that I find very interesting, right? Where you can really explore in your mind, but what if that's the case and the world's like this? I'm the fool, or the person who challenges. Actually, I'm a little bit of a arse in that I especially pick on certain game worlds because I don't feel like they're very fleshed out. They're there enough to give you the story of the game, depending on it. And the one that I probably beat on the most is 40K. Main reason being, because 40K is great for building a tabletop world where massive armies fight each other.
Indeed.
But it speaks almost nothing to what any of us would live a life like in the 40K universe. Because it is built on a scale of hundreds of millions of people, creatures, and things all interacting in the galaxy, where battles can wipe out entire planets like it's nothing. And so to make it work, especially in the Imperium or such, right, in the land of humans, they have whole planets dedicated to one industry. This is a farming planet. This is a whatever planet. So I'm like, well, what's life like for that farmer? And I have yet to see anyone really give me great stories. My buddy Mike, who loves 40K, has challenged me, saying there are some books that kind of touch on it. But I'm like, but that's not what the world is, man. It's all about space marines and tyranids and stuff like just big battle. I was like, what about the everyman? So I love any story or book that gives me enough of an understanding of the universe, of the world, to be able to place myself in it. Knowing that I ain't got no powers, right? I don't think I'm all that special off the top. Maybe I would do cool things, but where would I exist in this world? Is it real enough to me that I could picture all my friends, how we would interact in this world? So that's what I look for in like a good world building.
And it's funny you mentioned friends, because that was going to be the next thing you brought up is Chris's friends. When I initially was coming up with the story idea and coming up with characters, another thing I thought of is what's a common successful and interesting trope that I love in good fantasy and sci-fi, and that's the trio. There's always a trio: Harry, Ron, Hermione, Spock, McCoy, Kirk. And so I gave Chris 2 friends, and of course at the time I'm like, I just don't want them to be, they're there for the fun of it. They have to be important to the story. So this was, it's been years and years in development. It's been so much fun. But you got his best friend, Emmy, Emmanuel Dubois, goes by Emmy, French descent, honestly one of the only white characters in my story. But she's his best friend, not as much into the nerd scene as he is, has tolerated some anime because of his interest, but otherwise is just, a really good friend, has been there for him, has been like a sister to him since his sister passed away.
Okay.
And she's very much she's the opposite of him in so much as she's into the spiritual side. She's, does the things you would expect a spiritualist to do, meditation, yoga. Not that yoga is a spiritual thing in and of itself, but that's
it's meditation
common. It's a common association.
Health nut.
Yeah, she's very much a health nut. Tries to get him in.
Wait, does she live in Denver?
Yes.
Really? I think I can suddenly picture her.
She's a redhead, though.
I mean, I'm just looking at cookie cutter, fit gal in Denver. I'm assuming on a social media thing might have a post of doing like a handstand on a paddle board in the middle of like the Boulder Reservoir or
like
something like
do.
that. It feels like
Yeah.
that kind of person that you could probably like throw a stone anywhere in Denver and hit 3 of. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
I can picture that. At least a template. I can picture.
Yeah. And then there's their other mutual friend, Alicia, who is... Wow, I'm saying a lot, sorry. She's an immigrant from Australia, her and her dad.
Okay.
Spoilers, her dad is important to the entire story, but we'll get into that later. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll just have to read
Something to look out for when you read it.
Yeah. But she's kind of got despite being someone who's lived in the United States only about 10 years, she's kind of got the girl next door vibe. Chris has a big crush on her in the beginning. Overall, always. Anyway, and she's the kind of people I have come to know since I've moved to Denver more than the athletic type.
Okay.
She's a cosplayer. She's a geek and a nerd who goes to conventions. She sews. She's very imaginative, and yes, Beck was an inspiration for some of these things.
He's asking me, what can I do with this character? I'm like, well, what about this?
And
Let's say I can imagine where that kind of interplay. I was going to ask how much you might have had those kind of conversations with people around you to help you fill out certain characters or situations and things like that.
I came up with her before I even met Beck, but when I rewrote book 1 and wrote the entire trilogy, a lot of it was informed by my experiences in this community since then. Because I've had tables at WhimsyCon and Mile High Con and what's the big sci-fi one? Starfest. And I've done MC work for costume contests at some of these, and I've been exposed to a lot of this world, and I love it, and I don't think it gets enough mass media attention because I think it's a fantastic world. Yeah. So I wanted that to be a big part of her character, and it also fits into their magic without giving away too much, as magic kind of seeps back into the world for various reasons. Each of them has different abilities. Chris's abilities are very arcane-based, power-based. Go figure, on the cover he's summoning a plasma ball. He's a freaking engineer summoning a plasma ball, and he can shoot particle beams. Emmy is very much a nature person, so shape-shifting becomes her thing into animals.
Okay.
And Alicia, being the imaginative type who creates things with her hands and her mind, is a enchantress and conjurer. So she can use symbols etched into things to enchant them with powers once her abilities start to come to fruition.
Okay.
And that's just some of the, those are the ones I focus on in book 1, but those are just some of the abilities and powers that you'll see in the trilogy and beyond.
So speaking of abilities and powers that we're going to be introduced to in your books, without necessarily giving up any spoilers or specifics of them, but the way the world works kind of question, knowing that this has been a existence of Earth that has been shielded essentially from magic, purposely, and that it's now seeping back in, does the fantasy that we all, in our everyday real lives, experience and have throughout time influence how the powers that are generated and what the characters foresee or see themselves as in the world, their perception of it? Or, in a bigger way perhaps, has the fact that magic's always been shielded been a mechanism for what has inspired much of the fiction and things we've all experienced over the years?
So definitely the last bit, they even give some examples in here of, there's been cracks in the barrier. You've seen it in history and news. And no, we haven't. Like, have you ever heard of Nessie from Loch Ness? It's like, wait, what? And another character, Shara, who looks like an elf, but if you call her an elf, she's going to hit you.
Okay.
She has been stranded on Earth since World War II. Because of a crack in the barrier that opened a portal and kind of snatched her from her world and deposited her on Earth, and she's been stranded here since. Again, I'm debating how much of her backstory I should go into as to why it was during World War II specifically and how that ties into the story. But so yeah, she's been stranded on Earth for a long time. She has the longevity that you would expect from elves in fantasy, but she's not a Tolkien elf.
Okay.
If you even suggest that to her, she'll get pissed off at you, and that's putting it lightly.
Do I look like I run around in trees in a forest waiting for everyone else to... No.
And she has assimilated into Earth, into especially the United States culture, because it was U.S. soldiers that rescued her from the Nazis that were torturing her.
Oh, gotcha.
So she has pledged her loyalty to Earth. All of her magic is, of course, blocked, so she can't use magic anymore now that she's on Earth. And she's become a member of the Sentinels, protecting the barrier, protecting Earth, because that's who rescued her.
Okay, cool. So
yeah, all you hear about people who do fantastical things, probably magic seeping through. You hear about monsters like the Jersey Devil, probably came through a portal on accident one day and got stranded on Earth. So yes, there is definitely that influence.
Okay, cool.
For sure.
And then on the other direction of that, you mentioned a little bit with Chris, manifesting essentially plasma, and it sounds like, not knowing how the magic system works, but a curiosity of how much of, because it seemed like each of your characters that you described there and kind of where they're leaning towards in their magic is representative of their personalities and interests anyways. And so my curiosity then would be, how much of that is due to their innate curiosity and what they were into anyways, thus that they somewhat manifest already what they're interested in? Or in the same vein, is it the other direction around? They were always magical, but what they're into is a reflection of what their inherent abilities would have been.
You're kind of asking the chicken and the egg question there.
Yes.
Because in this world, magic is directly tied to the soul. And the soul is a reflection of who you are. So, and your magic is powered by your soul, too.
Okay.
And spoiler alert-ish, not really. Chris has got a little more juice where that's concerned, and as to why you'll have to read to find out. But yeah,
it's not a Ninetales, right? It's
Ninetales. I mean, I know what that is, but I don't get the...
Beck's giving me the thing like, I see what you're saying there. Okay. Naruto has an infinite amount of chakra, basically, because he's imbued with the Ninetales in him.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I do not know Naruto, sorry. I know some anime, not all.
She's helping. Thank you, Beck. Yeah. That is enough of an answer for me.
Yes, but no.
Yeah, no, that's enough of an answer for me. I will have to read to find out the details of how of what charges Chris's batteries to get to know more.
And yeah, Beck was actually one of my 2 primary beta readers. To give you an idea of how different this story is and how I, at least, am hoping it will do way better than anything I've written before as far as people's interests. She has never been able to get through Sword of Dragons Book 1.
I always get down to like the last chapter or 2, and I can't finish it. And it's not like it's badly written. I like fantasy, but for some reason, I just can't finish the Sword of Dragons series. When he gave me this to beta read, I read it in like a day and a half, maybe.
Same with books 2 and 3.
I just could not get enough of this.
Well, that is usually, I would say, a pretty good response, something you'd hope to get as an author, to have a reader unable to put it down. I know in books I've read, and some recently, back to like Jim's books and stuff, that I've had moments where I was like, darn it, I knew I shouldn't have read this before going to bed, because
Dresden has done that to me
now,
a couple of times.
now it's an hour later versus I was hoping 10, 15 minutes later, because darn it, you left me with a cliffhanger and I need to know more. And I've definitely had the ones where, gosh, I barely took half a breath from the end of a chapter to, but what's going to happen next? Whose story is it now? And wanted to keep going. So that sounds like a really good sign.
Yeah, I'm thankful that I was not working at the time because it was pandemic and I was staying home. So I just I got up, picked up the book, and just read the whole entire time. Then he would come home. I'm like, what, you fucker?
She'd be like on the last couple of chapters. So I'd sit quietly and do my own thing while she was reading. And it is such a wonderful feeling as a writer to hear someone else laugh at jokes that you weren't sure were funny or not,
I think that...
Or start crying and sobbing.
No, it's funny because I've watched one of the Netflix series that I enjoy that's a resurgence one is the Movies That Made Us, the one that came off of the Toys That Made Us guys.
Okay.
I love that series. And they've been talking about, movies that we all know and love, they're blockbuster successes, but the making of were not necessarily... They were problematic and maybe almost didn't make it. Mm-hmm. But I think the reaction I keep hearing from them is the screening, right? That first time, they weren't even sure what the movie was going to be. The screening happens, their reactions of fans and stuff as they're doing it, where they finally sit there and go oh, that did land, right? That joke hit. Or, wait, people are really apparently responding to this character's emotions and stuff. And we might have actually made something, right? That whole maybe this isn't going to fail, that kind of feeling.
Hope.
So it's but that's the thing, right? So it's entertaining to hear that same kind of construct of hearing basically the reaction, or being able to see the reaction for someone reading the book, because how often as an author you're going to really get that,
right?
That you're going to be able to sit there and just don't worry as I stand over here watching you read.
Not awkward at all.
Yeah, but did you like that? Did you get that? No,
there are, and as you would expect with urban fantasy, you see it in Dresden a lot of geek references. Chris and Alicia especially are big geeks, so they quote movies and anime and video games a lot, and sometimes that's the butt of the jokes is those pop culture references, and so
here's a question for you, because I, of course, am probably amongst the target audience for a book like this.
Definitely.
I know those communities. I run around a lot of the same circles and enjoy a lot of the same kind of fantasy and things like that. Are you concerned at all that some of those references are too niche or too specific, that a wider audience who might pick up and start reading the book would miss them? Or even if they did, do you think they're so core to kind of what you're trying to express to the character of the story that somebody might just not kind of be able to get it if they don't know the world we enjoy?
It's possible, but that's also, I drew from a very broad source, because when it comes to books, I'm picky about what I read, but when it comes to movies, I'll watch just about anything, and I know references from just about anything. Because I'll put in a Star Wars quote, or I'll put in a Star Trek quote, but I'll put in a Princess Bride quote, and I'll put in I don't think I actually put it in the trilogy, but a joke from Jack Reacher movies, stuff like that. I mean, there's just I was not narrow about it, so I'm hoping that someone reading it who might not know all of the things will get some of them and still appreciate it and get something out of it.
And I think he even poked fun a couple of times, like Chris and Alicia or Chris and someone else shared an anime joke or something, and someone nearby just kind of gives him a look like, what is that one from? So you have background characters that if you're not in on the joke, you are at least relating to the background. Yeah, you can understand
that not everybody would necessarily get that joke, that it's okay that you might not have.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good to hear, because I guess the next question I was going to have, with that being the world that you've created and kind of the influence you already mentioned, is would you feel like this book, compared to, admittedly, so the Dragons wouldn't have the opportunity to do this, but because you're placing this one in essentially today, and in the world we understand that we're going to find out more too upon the events and plot that's occurring in the book, that you were able to, or did you consciously even think to, put more of like yourself into this book? And kind of your interests, your loves, your things like that? Or like, does it just come naturally that, well, of course I brought up this reference because that's just something I'm into? Or did you step beyond that in any way and purposely go look up additional pop references and things that kind of extend beyond yourself and what you know, more to what your characters might know?
I think in the case of anything that I usually wouldn't know myself, it's only because I've been exposed to it from other people, such as yourself or Beck, or any of my broad and group of people that I interact with in conventions, because I like anime, but I don't love it or obsess over it, and so most of the anime references are either some of the stuff I have gotten to know thanks to Beck introducing me to it, or just seeing it around animes. So I guess it's a bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I said because for me, probably the most, admittedly, pop culturist referenced book I've ever read, right, is Ready Player One. Because it is, but it's kind of the point, right?
Yeah.
The whole point of that book is to experience a time frame kind of through the eyes of the author, and thus what sets up to the why behind his world. And so that's where I had a bit of curiosity there, where if there were things that you might have even had to specifically go reference yourself or go research because you wanted to include it because it makes sense for that character, but it's not your jam.
That might have, thinking back on it, especially like Emmy, some of the stuff she might have said or done, I think I would have had to, it's not from stuff that I personally know or experienced, but have seen in others, I should say. Like, I don't think that made it into the final cut of book one, but kombucha. I can't stand that stuff, but I know people who are like, oh, it's the best thing in the world. So I think I'd put a reference to that in book one, and then I ended up cutting it for whatever reason.
Because you have taste.
No, wait. That was loud.
No. It's a bit of a joke. I've had kombucha in a way that wasn't terrible, but it's not something that I would go to.
Yeah.
I think I can put it kindly-ish that way. No, that's funny. That's funny because, I can see that. It's just like if I were to suddenly say, like, oh, because they're having a quinoa salad or something. Like, good for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, and that was even interesting. I think that's kind of fast forwarding to book two. There's a scene where Chris and Emmy are ordering coffees from Starbucks for everyone, and everyone had a different drink, including one person who's like, screw coffee, give me tea. So it's like, and that's, I guess, a good segue into another part of this that I wanted to kind of highlight is diversity and inclusion is a big deal to me, and I consciously made an effort to make it even bigger in this, not just with the main characters, but with the side characters as well. And I didn't want them to be thrown in there as like, here's your token this character, there's your token that character. No, they're all important. They're all, at least I hope I did a good job of that, making them fully realized characters throughout the trilogy so they get plenty of screen time. Because you got the Sentinels pilot and sniper, Tiana. She's African American, and she's a total badass, and she's jokes with Chris because he's terrified of flying, so the first time he goes up in a helicopter with her, she helps set him at ease. Marisol is one of the ground teams with the Sentinels that very Hispanic, but is completely different from anyone else and is awesome. I love her. Abby, she's disabled. I didn't get to go into as much of her backstory as I wanted to in the original trilogy, but that'll come in later books, why she's disabled and why she's with the Sentinels, which are interrelated, that dealing with stuff coming through the barrier. And yeah, it was extremely important to me, and it was also especially culturally important for me to get things right. And that's why I asked a lot of friends from around that, help me with this. I've credited a few, some of the biggest ones who really, really helped in here. Beck has a friend who was in Japan. I don't know if he's back from Japan. He Japan.
He is in Colorado right now.
Okay. He'd lived in Japan for a long time, and I needed help with like honorifics and other things like that. And I just, this book is not just something I created. This has been a huge collaboration because I wanted to make it right. I wanted to respect all the different cultures. Not as much in book 1, but throughout the trilogy, and especially in book 3, the LGBT community, I wanted to make sure that not just was represented, but was respected and done well. And that's been super important to me in this.
Gotcha. Well, and I'm assuming here, and you'll be able to answer real quick on it, that sideline joke involved, but the Sentinels themselves, I'm assuming, are kind of a force drawn together from elements all around the world?
It is global, yes.
Yeah, because I was going to jokingly throw in there, because if you were trying to create a group of honest diversity and it was taking place in Colorado, I feel like it would be a bit forced.
It's just the United States detachment of the Sentinels. You don't really see or hear much from the others until book 2. That's when it goes more and more global. Is with each book in the trilogy, it goes more and more global. And yeah, book 3 actually barely touches Colorado. Most of it takes place in other countries.
Okay. No, I said that was kind of my sideline, somewhat poor taste joke. That
No, and you're right. Yeah, that's
that if you're to look for that level of diversity here, you can find it, but you have to find it.
Yeah.
So.
Also, almost all of his characters are female.
Yeah, there's not a lot of guys. That wasn't a thing where I'm like, I'm going to make them all women. No, it just kind of, as I'm developing the characters, it just kind of naturally played out that way.
Okay.
But
yeah. Cool. So, assuming I can imagine all kinds of things, having not read the book, about, already we get the little bit of knowledge that there's going to be a cracking of the barrier in some form that allows magic to start to become an actual thing again, and thus how it affects the world, and that'll be interesting to discover. I guess there's a point there that it would only be spoilers to try to get anything about the main antagonist / plot in the story, and that's okay. We don't need to hit on that so much.
I am okay with saying that primary antagonist is Naboo, the half son, the demigod, half son of Marduk.
Okay.
When being a being of mostly pure magic, when the barrier goes up, it kind of cracks him, and he goes a little bit nuts. And then 4,000 years of gotta get that barrier down, but the Sentinels are stopping him at every point, so he despises the Sentinels. But being 4,000 years old, he's learned a thing or two, so he's good at the long game and manipulation.
Very cool.
To the detriment of one of the 3 characters, very much.
Okay. So, I guess then the questions I would have a little bit more is kind of, now that we know what's coming and the general idea of the book, is some of the logistics, I guess. So, book 1, Legacy. You have a copy in your hand here.
Indeed.
Where and when and how are people going to be able to start checking out the Chronicles of the Sentinels series?
So right now you can pre-order it, not just Kindle, but for the first time ever, I have a book that you can pre-order the print edition. which is incredible.
Nice.
Release date is next Saturday, August 7th, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's coming soon, very soon. I cannot wait. I'm also scared.
He is very nervous.
Because I
imagine any, let alone book you would write, getting it out to the public and having eyes on is going to be nerve-wracking to a degree, let alone introducing and starting a new series. Something that is a whole nother set of characters from anything you've presented to people before, and a style as well, because this isn't Sword of Dragons, this isn't the characters that people already know and the world people already know. This is a whole new adventure. And so I can only imagine what that must feel like. However, hopefully, along with that nerve, is a whole lot of excitement.
Oh, yeah.
Because it sounds like you've been working on this for quite some time to get it out there. And like, if I am correct in what you said at the beginning, you had actually started this prior to Sword of Dragons and such, or kind of like had been working on it as well.
So, Sword of Dragons, I guess you could say that started back in 2000.
Okay.
It wasn't until 2015 that I published that. So that one was
so that one actually
very long. Yeah.
Did hang out for a bit.
But I did start development on this before I published
the
first Sword of Dragons book.
Gotcha. You had started working on this before we were able to enjoy Sword of Dragons.
Yes.
And so, okay, that gives you the timeline on that. And now that the first one's coming out this coming Saturday, what is your plan, since you said all three of this first trilogy have been written, what's kind of your plan for how you want to get these out to the world?
Every 6 months.
Okay.
That is the goal. As soon as I am through the release of this book, I'm going to go back to the artist and start working on book 2. I had already talked to him about my ideas for the entire trilogy, the covers for all 3 books, but we'll have to go into details now for book 2, get the cover. That'll be the most important step because everything else pretty much is done on book 2. I'll have to, I've done the editing, proofreading, beta reading. Now I just need to convert it to the proper format for print.
Okay.
Get the cover, get all that together, and then get it in and get my first proof copies. Hopefully I can do that a little sooner than I did with this one as far as, in relation to release date. But yeah, 6 months. So what is that going to be? February, I think, is when I'm hoping book 2 should be out. And then August again for book 3.
Okay.
Which
awesome.
Is actually only slightly longer than the timeline of the actual progression of the trilogy.
Oh, very
takes place
cool.
over the course of almost a year.
So Earthweaver says pre-order is done. Looking forward to it and the continuation of the Dragon series.
Yes.
And so
on that note, I've also just a quick sideline. I haven't stopped work on book 4 of the Sword of Dragons, the main series book 4. It's over, I'd say about 2/3 of the way done, and I plan on using NaNoWriMo this November to finish it. So if all goes well, book 4 of Sword of Dragons will be next year, which means I'll be releasing 3 books in 1 year next year.
Whew. Nice. Nice. Well, got to keep yourself busy.
Yeah.
No, very cool. Now that's going to be a lot coming. So that's good to hear. So we talked about that. The pre-order is available. Where will, once it's out next week, people be able to look up and grab it? Or where's the best place for people to kind of find what it is for this series specifically to get hold of it?
So if you want a one-stop shop of where to find it, I have my own website that I built up for the first time, jonwasik.com. But basically any online book distributor, Amazon being the obvious, but Barnes & Noble, for the first time ever, Target.
Nice.
My book's up, right now available to pre-order on Target. So yeah, anywhere that has that. As far as ebook, I'm still making it exclusive to Kindle because there's a lot of advertising benefits that comes with that. Otherwise, I would gladly make it wide. But in the past, when I've released Sword of Dragons wide and not Kindle, none of the other platforms. I had one purchase on Barnes & Noble, and everything else was Kindle. So,
oh, gotcha.
Until there is a strong demand for other platforms, I'll probably stick with that.
No, that makes sense. It's one of the challenges, right? There is a limit to when you're self-publishing of where and how and what all it goes to. So that does make sense. So awesome. That'll be so everybody basically with that, make sure you're out there looking because it's going to be available right away.
Yep. I have a countdown timer going on jonwasik.com right now.
I just said that so
Nice.
in the chat. So yes,
Nice.
there's a nice big, right at the top of the page, nice big countdown for you.
Awesome. All right. So I want to make sure we covered that all with the book because you actually did bring up several things I'm kind of curious about, just general chat.
Sure.
If that's all right.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things early on you had mentioned about kind of where we'd gotten with the culture and stuff with cosplay, geekery, and all of that, and how you're not as worried about many people catching it because it's become such a big thing. I've seen conversation from various groups of friends of mine about the idea that is it good, bad, or other that so many of the things we grew up with, loving, that were very niche or separate from the public eye, are now so available in public. And whether that's a good or bad thing in some form. And I know that's kind of asking the black and white question without really looking for a black and white answer. But the idea that a lot of people I know, especially I hear it with gaming a lot, where they're like, man, it used to be we had to really do the things we needed to do to enjoy the games we enjoy. And now it seems like everybody's got an opinion about gaming. And yet there's some people who their version of gaming might be just what they get on their phone or just what they see from this one couple games they may have played on a console once versus people who really kind of dedicated a lot of time and space or whatever to their hobbies in gaming. And so I know some people that have a little bit of consternation against it where they're like, man, I don't like that it's blown up so much because now it seems like everybody, and this is them saying whatever, claims to be a gamer or whatever, or claims to be a geek when it comes to like Marvel movies and stuff like that have come out where, yeah, but prior to the Marvel movies, you had to read comics to get those stories and know those characters and really get involved with it. And no question, the majority of people have not read comics. Yet it seems like the majority of people have seen comic book movies now.
Well, and first thing I think of, perfect example of why I think it's mostly a good thing. Think about video games and think about just the evolution of music in video games. It used to be 8-bit, and then when it went to, CDs, they could start to put like rock and roll and other stuff on it, whatever. But nowadays, think Mass Effect, think Skyrim, think all of those. The massive orchestral musical suites, hours upon hours upon hours of music that they are doing because there are so many people buying this that they can afford to put that kind of production budget into it. And the production budget of video games has skyrocketed, but that's because they're making money back on it. And so in my opinion, the more people that are buying into these, the better chance of quality products we can get. That doesn't always play out that way, obviously, because we're all beta testers now. We pay to beta test, but, I still think overall that we're gaining more than we're losing. I look at Skyrim, I look at Cyberpunk with all of its woes, it still was a fantastic game that I loved, and I'm definitely going to go back and play it through again. And that's just one example. The MCU, I love the stories we're getting and the quality of the productions we're getting out of them. And I think that could only come from it blowing up thanks to the first Iron Man movie on up. But that's my thoughts.
Well, and also you're making it more available to the public that might not have even known that it existed before. Because my first introduction really into the Marvel films was, okay, my dad was watching Iron Man and whenever it was on TV, but my actual sitting down watching the whole entire film was the first Avengers film. And finally seeing it, I was like, wait, there's an archer? I was so excited because I love archery. So I really kind of like sat down, like tried to figure out, okay, what is this character? Can I know more about this character? And then they go back and introduce themselves to the earlier stuff. So you have people that are being introduced to it that are loving it and want to know more. So they go back to the original feed.
Okay. And so original, are you saying more so with like the rest of the movies and stuff that had come out?
The movies, even going back and finding out what were they like in the comics. Because I didn't know that originally he was supposed to be deaf.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
So ended up learning that, which was also a passion of mine, was sign language. So I was like, okay, so he's an archer and he's deaf. What? And then finding out how the other characters reacted to him. Like, there's a piece that keeps on going around Facebook or whatever of Deadpool interacting with Clint. And he's pulled up his mask so that Clint can read his lips, and he's signing things to Clint because he knows that he can at least read lips. So there's that relationship of understanding between the two of them that's really nice to see, that you don't usually see in the real world, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, it's definitely something where the storylines and world that have existed in comic books has been pretty fleshed out over the decades that it has been a medium for telling stories. And I've always appreciated Marvel for their ability to create characters that are more like real people that just happen to have abilities than I always argue DC's pantheon of gods. And so...
Sorry, dude.
Oh, no.
Because he's more of a DC guy, and I'm more the
like
Marvel.
Both. MCU has brought me more into Marvel. Plus, I've always liked X-Men. Like, I loved X-Men as a kid.
And X-Men was one of my big ones, right? Yeah. And that's that whole, not to do the DC verse kind of thing, because I enjoy Batman to a degree, specific storylines. I love Lobo. Lobo is probably my favorite DC character, true DC character out there. And I give mad props to DC's side hustle, Vertigo comics, to introduce some of the best storylines I'd ever read, with Hellblazer being John Constantine.
Oh, I didn't know that was... Okay.
And Sandman from Neil Gaiman. And so all of those like good stories that came out of Vertigo, which was a DC... comic line, their side one that they allowed themselves to do like actual good storytelling. Any of that, it wasn't capes and cowls, and so respect to those. So then the question kind of comes though, when we see the celebration, because I agree in the sense that you get enough people behind it, you have groups that have the money to get in there and start producing bigger, better detailed, better effect movie stories, things like that. I am appreciative that we have it to the point now that, unlike we can go look at series that existed in the past that were around comics and geekery like that, to kind of series we're seeing produced today in beyond just even the comic books to sci-fi and stuff like that, where people are taking the time to really take books and turn them series into like whole long things like Westworld, like The Expanse, right, into the MCU ones that we're seeing on Disney Plus with all of their shows. I can agree that getting that kind of attention behind it and general love allows them to now create a lot of these things and bring us more to enjoy that geeks would already have been online to find like that's our niche. However, when you start seeing some of the celebration of these kind of our geekdom, and I'll talk a little bit specifically of convention life because that's something we all know, and things like Fan Expo and its history, an entire life here in Denver of how it was Denver Comic Con, then it was Denver Pop Culture Con, and now it's Fan Expo. Now, granted, that's all legal nonsense around naming things, literally naming conventions.
Yeah.
But the kind of what you see for the content of people who go and what it is they're experiencing, do you guys feel like there's been anything that's been lost in bringing it to the mainstream in this way? That, because I remember first iterations, second year, because I didn't believe Denver Comic Con was really a thing the first year it happened. Because it's like, no, Comic Con's in San Diego. What's this Denver thing? So I missed the first year. But going from then on and expanding to this massive convention that you had people coming from out of state to come visit here in Denver. And I've ran into a ton of people who had just seen the movies, had only read a series of comics or something. A lot of people who were coming in from that mainstream side. Do you guys feel like anything changed about the way conventions were held and the focus of things based on that kind of wider exposure?
Some of them, yes. I especially look to the Denver Comic-Con, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I bring it up because it was the biggest, basically, one
it-
here.
The first time I went, I think... Actually, that was before I met you. I went with my friend... well, a couple of friends from work, actually. And it felt very well done. It wasn't overcrowded. It was a lot to see, a lot to do. Very... Yeah, I don't know. I very much enjoyed my first experience there. Same with all the subsequent years. I remember the 1 year going, and what sticks out in my mind is when you were dressed as a male version of Storm, and that was just awesome. But then after I met Beck, I wanted to show her, and we went, and that was shortly after I think it was one of the shootings at another convention, like in Phoenix or something.
Okay.
So they had drastically overhauled the convention.
When they did the big reaction on specifically cosplay and the props
No
they were
props
allowing
allowed.
Yeah.
and not allowing into the convention, yes.
And also someone had kind of messed up that year and double booked the convention center, so it was a little overcrowded. But then even the year after that, we went back, and it was still just for one day, and it was still... I feel like... I don't know where I'm trying to go with this, just so much that I have no plans to go again, because it's too stressful now. It's too much. It's too hard to get from point A to point B. You want to go see your favorite panel, well, you can't, because it's overcrowded. But I say that also knowing that we went to Gallifrey 1 right before pandemic, and we still went and watched Chris Eccleston despite the massive crowd, and that still was fun. So I'm not sure where the difference is between Gallifrey 1 and Denver Comic-Con, other than Gallifrey 1 intentionally keeps its numbers low for how many people.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like Gallifrey was nowhere near as crowded as Denver, whatever we're calling it now.
Fan Expo officially right now.
Because, that was the only year that I've gone, and I was so stressed out because how packed it was, how just sensory. I never really thought that I had a sensory thing, but oh my God.
It was too much.
It was too much going on all around you all at once. People were too close, it was too loud, there was too many visual things going on that I couldn't even think of panels that we wanted to go to, let alone how the heck do we even get to it? So for the most part, I kind of usually just stick to the smaller conventions such as WhimsyCon, where you're pretty much guaranteed like less than a few hundred people maybe for the whole entire weekend. Yeah, that means probably not as much to do, but it's not as stressful.
Well, like, basically hundreds of people in any one thing versus, line. Well, because I admit, when you go to Fan Expo, at least the last couple times I'd been to any of their stuff, if I really wanted to see, John Barrowman or something like that, I was in line, an hour before that panel, which, admittedly, having been to some of the biggest conventions in this country or around, like San Diego Comic-Con and stuff, you do that, right? Difference being San Diego Comic-Con, I go and I went to see the panel for his Dark Materials because Lin-Manuel was going to be on it. And the whole cast was there, right? And it's like, yeah, okay, it was worth me giving up this many other interactions to experience this.
And I would love to be able to see more bigger name actors, because I did get the chance at Gallifrey 1 to meet Pearl Mackie, who played Bill in Capaldi's series of Doctor Who. And I adored her. She was the sweetest thing ever. I started crying, and she was just absolute doll. Getting to see Eccleston on stage,
I like him.
on the other side of the room from me. I mean, didn't actually get to see him personally because the lines for the meet and greet with him were absolutely insane, and the guy was an angel to stay later. He stayed later than it was actually scheduled to for both of the days that he had meet and greets, because he wanted to make sure that all of the fans got a chance to get what
Yep.
they paid for, and he came in early the next day even too. But yeah, that's not really a thing with the smaller conventions because it's so expensive to get the bigger name people.
It is that you have to have the draw, right? And so there's a thing there about just the size of the convention you might go to, let alone the popularity of whatever it is that they're focused on. It is why I like some of the smaller cons because they'll be focused on like one thing, right? One specific thing. You know, when I got to meet, and I apologize for not knowing the actor's name off the top of my head, you'll probably fix me, Rufio, right?
Dante.
When I went down to, I forget the name of it, the library con here in town that's a single day, 4-hour or 5-hour con, or whatever it is.
I don't know this.
I'm not
You have
familiar
yet to
with
be with
this one
that?
either.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, this is it's a library focused con. It's more about said, but he was there, and so the size of the room to see him was not much bigger than like my living room, family room area, and you got to just walk up to like a table that was set on the side with the line come around to go like, "Hey, you're awesome," right? And the prior year I'd met one of the voice actors. So there's one thing about the venue and kind of how it's held, but the fandom is what I'm kind of curious about with the overall such, because, and I don't know how I feel about this fully. I'm not fully sold on one opinion or another, because I agree with the more popular it is, the more likely we're going to see quality, hopefully, at least funding-wise and approval for projects to come through. Heck, I'm super excited. There's a Sandman series coming. You know, Neil Gaiman is producing. I cannot wait. It looks cast pretty darn well. Yes, I don't get my little goth death in the way that I imagined her in the comics, but I think everyone in it looks like it's going to be a great telling of the story. I don't know if that would have happened if MCU movies hadn't blown up like they had and things like that.
Good point.
But there's also a side of me that goes to, when I go to some of these events, it seems like there's a lot of people there who all they know, love, feel is the big movie. And thus they don't have any reference to a lot of the source or where it came from. And I don't know if that detracts or if it kind of in a way just clutters what I want. Like, gets in the way of me going to, you know, and I'm challenging myself in this because the whole time I discuss, anytime I feel like someone's trying to say, no, it needs to be for us who suffered through to enjoy these things when it wasn't cool. That there's a bit of gatekeeping in that, because it's like, therefore, darn it, I don't think you've earned the badge that says you should be allowed to enjoy this the way I do. But at the same time, I'm trying to focus on that level of, but I'm so down with everything that MCU is doing right now that I'm happy it's big enough that I can now expect to see more. Right? That there's now additional like 7-8 big movies still on the line to come out, and another however many series that we're going to get. And same thing with like Star Wars and the next, what we're going to get more of Fett and Mandalorian and Ahsoka and everything else that we're going to get. That's like, I'm down that all that's happening. So in a way, I'm like joyful that the geekdom has been picked up. And that's a piece too, where it's weird because you have your mainstreams, right? And then, example, I can look around my office because this is a great display of a random plat of geekery. And I see where there's still things on my walls or things around on my shelves that a lot of people probably wouldn't get.
Yeah.
There's still tidbits here and there that people would be like, I don't get it. But there's a lot that I feel like now you would. Right? So I'm struggling. And just so that, John, you could have seen it, kind of in that conversation, Dennis says, super good points. Same with any small niche thing like anime and tabletop gaming. They gain production values over everything. This leads to a bigger window for those who never could have experienced due to their life situation. And Hando bringing in about some of his favorites being Daredevil and Spider-Man. And my brother bringing in Silver Surfer being one of his go-tos. And such. Because, I mean, everyone had at least one comic I hope you've read, right? And because X-Men, especially the reboot of X-Men, when they first came up and, you know, just before, although I lived through when Wolverine did the bone claws, right? But the whole scene of like Magneto ripping the skeleton from him was like,
God, I remember reading
oh,
that.
that's epic, right? Just such good experiences with that. And now in gaming too, right? Because now you have games, and speaking specifically for the two of you, popular enough, and this is me being PC elitist, right? Whatever. But that like Mass Effect gets a full remastered trilogy. Right, that comes back and now is a better version of all of it for a series that a lot of people love. And you get a lot of games that are being able to, the engines behind them are being built up and such now that it's easier to make AAA games with smaller resources and stuff, and yet the AAA games are these monolithic, massive things that are being done.
And yet you still can with a small team because holy crap, Valheim, the amount of people that have bought that game, and it's still an alpha for crying out loud.
Well, there's a funny thing with Valheim specifically, and this will be something almost to the community, and heck, I like to pimp them anyways. But so with my buddies over at Drakkar,
He
was down there yesterday, Friday went down because we were hoping to a group of mine to acquire a very inexpensive car that we can hopefully go race in the 24 Hours of Lemons race at High Plains this fall. And so we thought we had a line on a car down there, went down there, we were supposed to get it for the $500 that we needed. Sold it out from under us. Like before we could get it, we got there a little late. But while we were down there, I was like, I'm in the Springs. Shucks, I'm out of mead. I should go buy a Drakkar.
heck yeah.
And while I was there, we were chatting because a meadery opened by a bunch of geeks that we know. We're talking about gaming in general and just talking about all the geekdoms and such. And mentioned maybe that's something I should host is an event that is a Valheim Day with everybody getting in together, playing, building up together while having their bottle of mead on their side. Because I feel like that is oddly well situated as something that should be an event.
That would be so fun.
And so, yeah, I'm kind of doing that light, like, are people curious or interested? We could totally do a live stream of, like, us all getting together on a fresh Valheim server with some mead. And
I'm for it. What do you say, babe?
Yeah, I was going to say, the game allows up to 20 people on a server, so why not?
I feel like it could be a thing, because I talked to them, and they were like, oh, we haven't been on Valheim in a minute. And so I was like,
We just played last night.
Yeah.
Beat the
second boss? Yeah, second boss.
second? Yeah, it's a second
Elder,
boss.
yeah.
Holy crap.
Still got a ways to go.
And I still have not even touched the game. But it's one of those things I'm curious, especially since they have the VR mod I need to check out.
What?
Yes, there is a mod for the VR playing of Valheim that is supposed to be really legit. Like they say, it's not always the best to play with people who don't have the mod, because you will look funny as a person running around from the VR perspective.
We saw that with Minecraft, yeah.
But if everybody has the mod added, even if they're not in VR, it looks more natural. But it's similar to the Minecraft in that there's some points where just swinging, like for resource gathering, doesn't necessarily pick it up. You have to like hit the button.
Yeah.
But in attacks, apparently they got that working with swinging things with archery and with stuff like that to work actually fairly well in the game. So I'm curious to check it out. Like,
Good
very
archery
much.
games in VR.
Archery is a great thing for VR. It really is. It feels great.
Well, that's another example of, thank goodness things are going mainstream because we're seeing more quality VR titles. Half-Life Alyx being the most
Well, and it's
obvious.
funny, though, right? Because Half-Life Alyx is now basically 2 years old. And there's been questions about what other big VR titles are coming out. I just picked up, not new, but version 2 is coming out, Lone Echo.
Oh, yeah,
it was on sale on VR or on Oculus Store because it's an Oculus exclusive for like $10. So I was like, fine, I'm gonna pick this thing up. Started playing it yesterday, and it's good. It's like a legit no, it's good, really good, and I want to play with it more. Oh, interesting, Earth. I don't even know. It says, would it be a cooperative weekend or a separate? I have no idea. I don't know the mechanics.
I mean, I prefer co-op myself, but with that many people, I could see where
I
co-op
could
could
see.
be challenging.
Well, I could see splitting it into perhaps 2 tribes, and even perhaps doing a bit of a competition.
Who can get to the bosses first?
Well, something about 2 different setups on the same server. Who could rush to whatever, and after a certain time frame, even maybe if it's like a fixed time, everybody fight. Like
Interesting.
if you could get up to a certain level, build whatever you're doing and things for 2 hours. And then everybody let's go, come together, and something happens. I don't know. I don't know the mechanics.
That would be a challenge, because getting to the first boss is quick. It took us a long time to get to the second boss, and even when we did fight him last night, we barely beat him. And
I was down to 1 arrow. 1 arrow out of 100.
I mean, yeah, it took a lot to take him on.
No, it's a good set.
So we each had a full stack.
Because I know I have a whole group of people who've played Valheim, Hando's saying he would buy it for that and such, and I haven't even checked it out. It's nice because it's only a $20 game. But I feel like that's something that could be organized if people were interested.
Yeah.
Like blending of worlds. Let's one, supporting all my geeks, and two, let's all, play a game together.
Yeah, with mead.
Right? Well, and I
With
think
mead.
I got to double check if Drakkar can ship everywhere. I know they ship, but
At
if
least
we
the
set
US.
it up ahead of time,
Yeah.
I think there'd be an opportunity for everybody to have a bottle of their traditional mead or such in possession before we actually hosted it.
Get the raspberry. The raspberry's really good.
Well, you know what they did for us when we were there? Blend the raspberry and blackberry 50-50.
Interesting.
It was lovely. It's not something they bottle, but they were like, check this out. You can pour. And I was like, well, yes, you can. It was quite nice.
So you're talking about Lone Echo 2. I think we just picked up the first game. We haven't had a chance to actually
So that's
play it yet.
Lone Echo 1, I just started playing. I really enjoyed. I only played it for like 40 minutes or so yesterday.
That's the space one, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's good.
It looks good.
It looks as pretty as Alex in the sense of like details and things in there where I was like, okay, I'm happy with how this game looks. And the mechanics on it, because it has a continuous motion.
Take Dramamine?
No.
Oh.
It's done in a way so far that they got right on that edge of what a balanced, like, comfort motion is.
Cool.
Because it's slow. They have you moving around with little wrist thrusters. It's great. You hit a little button, you hit one of the buttons, and the little thrusters kind of go, whoop, psst, psst, but they only have a tiny bit of energy before they have to recharge. So you just do little spurts of it. So you never go really fast. But and it's intuitive. It's like, go forward, I need to go up a little, down, because you drift, and you keep drifting. And then you grab things to, like, stop yourself, and you can actually fling yourself around. And once you do it a bit, you're like, hey, this makes a lot of sense.
Nice.
I like this. So the control scheme on that is pretty legit, and so far it looks great. Like, I was tempted, feeling like I should stream that one a bit because of how good it looks.
Yeah.
So
I know one I want to try, but I'm kind of waiting till Halloween time frame. Wraith the Oblivion Afterlife, because
Okay.
I have been reading about that from reviewers, and it is getting major props. There was one guy who said that I kept having to take my headset off to remind myself that it's not real. I was like, that's
interesting.
And he was like
Terrifying.
terrified. Yeah. So I'm like, I kind of want to scare myself
Hey.
on camera for people.
You know what? Because I'm not big on scary games anyways. They suck. But every Halloween season, I subject myself for the entertainment of others.
I need to get back to Amnesia.
See, Amnesia's one. I've done some Amnesia. I've done Outlast. I've done a couple of those a little bit where it's like, bah! Because I'm not a big fan of scary games. But come Halloween, I'm usually willing to subject myself. And it's just like I have people who keep wanting me to play Phasmophobia.
That sounds like
It has a
really-
VR version.
What's it about?
And I was just like, nope. And then I got to watch La Campette play a little bit of Five Nights at Freddy in VR.
No!
And that was an interesting experience. And I got to watch when they saw, like, one of the bots came right up in the face. And they crumpled on the, like, Campette crumpled on the ground, like, wah! Down. And I was like, that's why I don't play horror games, especially in VR.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I don't want to be, like,
Looks pretty scary.
peeing myself.
Yeah, no, thank you.
In that, let alone some of the games that are literally designed like Face Your Fears and stuff like those, where it's like, heights? Here's a part of heights. Spiders? Here's a bunch of spiders. All those kind of things where it's like, nope. Not a fan. Let's see. Yeah, exactly. Earthly, they were saying, like, well, there's two things. It's the Halloween stream, where if it's done on Halloween, which actually this year I can probably do again.
Oh, yeah, huh?
Well, so
On
the
a
problem is, like,
Sunday.
Fan Expo's over Halloween. I think that's when Fan Expo is, as well as another con that are, like, both happening Halloween weekend. Or no, it
Leaky
was
Con.
going to
Leaky
Leaky canceled.
was,
Yeah.
they canceled
Leaky
to next
so
year.
now it's just Fan Expo. That's happening over Halloween, which I'm like, nah. But I'm doing Game Fest Halloween party the week before. So that Friday
right.
before is going to be the Friday night party, but it's going to be a Halloween party going into the Game Fest weekend. So I'll be available on Halloween, and one of my favorite things to do was to showcase my outside camera for anyone trick-or-treating, stream it so that people can see when I go to the door and scare kids, put on some kind of scary outfit, jump out and yell at them, which is always I enjoy it. I think it's fun, and then as well as play the scary game, so I hate myself in the process. And so maybe I could do that with a stream of it in VR coming up, because I could. Ooh, okay, I'm getting thoughts. This could be a plan, everybody, because they added things to the phone where you can do like AR mode in the Oculus app on the iPhone, so that you can actually use it to stream, like green screen yourself, basically. Put yourself in the game. You can do that
Like
through
they
its
do with
stream
Beat
for
Saber.
Quest games, and then so that's a possibility. But anyhow, we'll see. That could be something. VR is scary, but no, that's all good. So that's another fun thing, because these guys are also Quest owners, and so we talk VR and some of those kind of things. I'm always on the lookout at what else is there to play, because Beck, you just recently, like, you've been playing more Beat Saber, and you said you just hit your own little milestone.
Yeah, so there's very few Assassin's Creed songs that people have made maps for, and one of the ones that's really good right now is Pirates Beware from the 4th Assassin's Creed film.
That makes sense.
And I have been fighting to get a perfect score on hard on this map for a very, very, very long time. And yesterday, day before, I finally got my perfect score. I have always been missing like from 1 to 5 beats, and I almost collapsed to the ground when I was like, I think I just hit every single one, and the fireworks started. I was like,
There is a certain level of like just an amazing feel to when you knock out a perfect beat map in a Beat Saber, because I can do them on hard on several songs. Expert, whoop, nope. Still not
he
there.
started dabbling in the expert stuff. I don't know if I'll be able to go that high
You will.
with my shoulder, but
What you find is eventually you can get smaller motions, but you can do it. I'm sure you can. Because eventually what happens is the hard songs start not being hard.
yeah.
Well,
And then you're like, huh.
and that's the thing, like, if I'll go do some of the super fast-paced expert or hard songs, and then I go to a slower one, I'm getting ahead of myself and swiping too soon. I'm like, dang it.
Well, you start to have to like take breaths and say, wait for it. Thump. Thump.
Yeah.
Versus and all over. So yeah, no,
Try
that absolutely
everything.
happens. No, that's funny. So that's really cool. I'm trying to get myself to get back into VR more. As I've been bouncing around various games and stuff. Like I said, getting on that yesterday was fun because I got to do Lone Echo some.
Moss Book 2 is coming out. They just released a trailer a week or so ago.
Okay.
I am so excited.
I know
for
it's in
this.
development. I don't know when it's coming out, because
don't think
Moss
they've
is on the
announced
list
it.
of games that I tell everybody you should play Moss. If you have
Do
VR,
it.
you should play Moss. Doesn't matter what version of VR you have, it's worth playing. Because I think there's a Quest-only version of Moss, as well as I think the next one coming out. My hope always is that they will still include PC VR versions of most games, because the resolution is just so much better. For anyone who's done just Quest versions or just standalones, they're playable, they're fine. But if you can play the same game in the PC version, you'll sit there and be like, oh, this is how these can look. And it does make it so much better, just as an awareness thing.
Well, especially now you can do... There's 2 different methods now to do wireless PC on the Quest 2. So there's no excuse to do it. Well, there is an excuse. You got to get a Wi-Fi 6 router.
You don't. I don't have one.
That's right.
I have
Oh, you
Wi-Fi
do.
5, and it's 866 megabit per second, and it plays pretty darn good.
Dang it. See,
There's a
with my
few
old 5, I
moments.
couldn't-
There's a few moments every once in a while, like when you talk about getting perfect scores on Beat Saber. Every once in a while, I have like just that half-second hiccup that'll make me miss a note.
Yeah.
We
And
still
so
get that, yeah.
I've accepted that my chance of getting 100% on some of these expert songs is probably not that high, but I can still play them, and it's not the connection that's making me fail on those maps, right? That's not the issue. I might miss more notes than I'd like, but it's not the connection. But I say that because I'm still on board to get a Wi-Fi 6 router, but I actually had one of the smaller APs in my cart the other day that I wanted to get because it was finally in stock, but I was like, that's the little one, though. I want the big one so I can actually replace the one I have so it has full house coverage. The one there will work, but it's the smaller 2x2 radio versus the 4x4 radio, one that I want. And so I was like, nope, just wait for the big one. You're still fine. You can still play it. Yes, I'm missing out on what may be about 400 megabit per second of overall bandwidth, but it hasn't negatively impacted me yet.
Yeah.
So Yes, but you are right. It is beneficial, and I just saw a thing the other day where there was a Wi-Fi 6 router advertised for, I think it was $60 somewhere for one that I saw that wasn't like one of the big name brands, but I was like, $60, Wi-Fi 6, you're pretty good there.
Yeah.
But yes, being able to use the AirLink now on Quest from Oculus, as well as virtual desktop to do remote streaming. If you have played VR, it's awesome. If you've played VR wirelessly, untethered, it is steps beyond.
Okay.
You know, just the way it opens up the play space, and you don't actually have to worry about where your hands are flopping and stuff like that. Makes so much of a difference.
Tripping on the cord.
Tripping on the
I
cords.
yanked the cord out of the old Rift S once because I stepped on it. It's like, shit!
That was playing Half-Life Alyx, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Plus, well, that's a different story altogether. But yeah, the difference of quality in video from the Rift S to the Quest 2 is incredible. Let alone, I can't wait to see what they do with the next generation.
I follow it a lot, and it's interesting because there are other companies out there not making standalone headsets yet. They're making tethered, PC tethered / PC ones, but they're upping the resolution significantly still. It'll be curious because I still see it a bit, and I think somewhat with the lenses where one, I get a little bit of light glare every once in a while depending on what I'm seeing in the scene that makes it all look a little washed out at times. But for the most part, it's pretty darn good. But compared to my old Oculus that I had, the Rift 1, that now my nieces have, it is leaps and bounds better. Although even that, I always tell people, even the original Rift still plays great. And I was playing it up through all of these games. I was playing, I think, what was the latest game I played on that one before I got the Quest 2? I think I played Alyx on it for distance before I finally got the Quest 2. And it still, I was very happy with it. So, but I do put it out there that it's great. Yeah, so Dennis says, talking from experience, Wi-Fi 6 router I use is the only bottleneck now is the PC. Mm-hmm. I run in that too, and I am struggling desperately to wait on my upgrade path because, both of us, right? You guys actually, I think, are overall better PC specs than I am right now.
Probably the only one is the video card.
Well, so, yeah, I've got a 3090, and it's a beast.
So do I, but you've got an aftermarket one.
Yeah, no, but nothing else. But nothing I have needs a 3090. Yeah. It just means my GPU is not my bottleneck at all in anything. Like I have forgotten that I was mining while gaming a couple times because I was actually having to do some crypto mine, and it was still performant. I still was like, oh, I was playing Warzone and I still had the miner up. Huh. Now, the mining software is smart, and it mostly throttles itself down, but still, I was like, that means I was 100% GPU the whole time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, actually, it was pretty playable. It wasn't so bad. But mine's my CPU. I'm still on an old i7 6000 series, 6850. And while that goes up to 3.6 gigahertz, I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
Even though it has 12 logical cores, it's a 6-core dual-thread processor, it's like,
Thankfully, more and more games and programs are starting to take advantage of that, but not enough. I don't know why it's taken so long. I know it's complex. I know.
Yeah, I was gonna say I actually had that conversation too just recently because somebody had the same kind of response of like, "But man, we've got all these cores. Our hardware's so strong." It's like true, but actually putting a task at a program that allows it to efficiently, because games being different than rendering software and stuff like that, where rendering software, right? You task it to say, "Give me this result." Now go chunk on the math to do it and give it back. It can parallel process that chunk of math a ton. Mm-hmm. Throws it out there. It can leverage all the compute cores, all the stuff, and get it all back in a much faster solution. In gaming, where it's a combination of CPU-related loading of resources and rendering, putting it out into the physics, although physics can be somewhat graphics card now as well, but like the AI routines and all those kind of things that the game has, while the graphics card doing the visualization, there's a limit to how much you can actually render pull on the CPU at a time before you have to wait for something to happen, right? That it's just got to get through that one thing. It's not trying to answer 1,000 questions. It's trying to answer the one thing. Mm-hmm. And everything has to wait on that result.
Yeah.
And so there's a point where it's like diminishing returns the moment. I would love if people figured out how to crack that. Mm-hmm. Because yes, the potential for some good multi-core gaming, like the best times I saw where that really kicked in was some of the RTSs I was playing, like Supreme Commander and stuff, where you could have thousands and thousands of units on the screen.
I love those.
They figured out how to multi-thread, right? And it really made a difference. But half the games I play, it doesn't. At most, you see them using maybe 2 or 3 cores, but even then, they usually spike 1.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah, freaking Minecraft, because I mod the hell out of it. I'm not stressing the GPU out too hard now because of the 3090, but the CPU is always capped out on one thread.
Yep, that's the thing, right?
Yep.
One thread.
It's like, damn it.
And the only thing I've ever been able to do when that's a situation, PC issues, right, is that I've been able to sometimes like put the affinity of it for one CPU, the one that clocks best, and then try to tell everything else that's running to go to other cores. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want anything else to touch this core but the game.
Yeah.
I wish there was an easier way, Microsoft, to allocate to say only put this program on this core, everything else distribute. Because that would be great. That's what gaming mode should do on Windows. It should be like, game, this core that clocks the highest, everything else goes somewhere else. And chill. Yeah. That would be perfect. Anyhow, as we completely like all over the place with things, because gaming, and it's what we do, and we haven't hung out for a minute.
Yeah. Well, and then, you were saying you were thinking of waiting. DDR5 memory has not yet gotten quite mainstream, but it's getting there. And when it does, CPUs that are matching its capabilities, that'll be
the things on the horizon for technology from a gaming perspective, from PC specifically. You got DDR5 coming out, which is going to have much faster bandwidth and the ability to do larger data sets of memory. Not that I've got 64 gigs now. Granted, that next machine will probably be 128 gigs because I can. This one could do 128, but at this point, my resources are never over. Like, I'm currently using 13 gigs. It's trying to use the memory, right? That's not an issue. But PCI Express 5.0 will be out, which will be able to fully push like video card bandwidth and things like that, as well as potentially storage bandwidth, where you could put in daughter boards that'll be able to do NVMe speeds at truly high end, right? As well as their newer PCI Express stuff where the NVMe drives, the faster ones of those will be hitting. That up the for everyone who tried to say, PlayStation 5 the loading speed. Yeah, PC can do that too, just so you know. But that is going to enable all those things as well. So I am looking for that. The multi-core modules that they're coming out with for both GPUs and CPUs, where they're doing big little schemes, where they're doing major cores, a certain number of them that are big, designed to do the hard processing, but then throwing on a whole bunch of smaller compute cores and stuff like that are meant for other tasking, but allows them to do bigger chips that are more, basically performant as a whole, be able to do more throughput, because that's how they're answering some of the clock speed versus smaller transistor perspective. And so we're potentially going to see CPUs now that they're still hitting Moore's law in a way of performance, but it's not going to be based on die shrinking of the die. It's going to be how they build the overall CPU core that it's going to do percentages X more than any previous generations because they're doing it differently. That's going to be hitting. They're applying the same logic to video cards. There's a rumor. This struggles me in my groups as we talk about these cards we have. There's a rumor that came out recently, a leak that said that maybe the next NVIDIA card, let it go, all the companies are doing well. Intel's coming out with their video card solution that looks actually to be decent, and especially for prices. So you're going to have a third-party market there. I just saw, and I haven't gotten into the details with it, an announcement that the 3DFX brand name may be coming back.
Okay.
As another video card competitor, but I don't know who owns that. So I don't know whose silicone that'll be, but I just saw a thing on that. And that was one of my first video cards. First standalone 3D card was the 3DFX. And so the market's growing out, all this technology setting. They're talking about doing that with video cards as well, and they're saying that the next 4090 leak only, but our 3090 should be able to do 31 teraflops of performance. That's a lot. That's a lot of computations per second. The 4090, rumored based on just what they're showing the technology could be, they're talking about potentially 81 teraflops of performance.
Oh, damn.
Do simple math. That's 150% fast. That's 2.5 times faster than the current top card from NVIDIA.
And nothing is saturating the current.
That's like...
Not even Crisis Remastered.
Oh, man, no, nothing's killing my GPU. But that's a question of like, so do I sell my 3090 and get a 4090?
I'm glad that I made the leap from the 2000 to the 3000, but normally I skip a generation.
I normally do too. I feel like the 3000... Now, granted, I did because I was on a 1080 before I went to a 3090. That's where it's hard, because that 40 is like, that's the next generation. I shouldn't do that. But if it's that much more performance, and at that point I'm pretty much just building a whole new PC. But the desire is big.
Yeah.
It is big. I want to be that guy.
I think I would only make that leap if it had some new capability, like how ray tracing was big for the 2000 series. If they introduced something brand new, game changer like that in the 4000, I would.
Other than straight performance, I don't see it. I think the only reason it tickles my brain is there's this little bit of this like time frame, because I don't know if you guys have seen how much in-store versus eBay pricing of a 3090 is right now.
Jesus, yeah.
In store, apparently, not mine's a aftermarket, yours is a founders type thing. It's they're going for about $2,500. Last I saw on like eBay, Amazon, stuff like that, they were selling for like $3,200 and higher.
Jesus.
Which is more than $1,000 more, like almost in the range of like $1,400 more than I spent for mine, which is almost the cost of mine. And there's a piece of me that says, if I timed it right, could I just swap? Could I sell a 3090 to someone at a time frame before the 4090s are out there, right around where it really doesn't cost me that much to get the 4090?
If you can snag one, if they got the same freaking distribution
issues.
Well,
yes, this is doing the inside track of doing whatever. But apparently, talking to people late last night, my inside source, local Micro Center had on shelf, by close of business last night, 4 3090s, some 3060s. I don't know if they still had any 3080s. But on shelf, last night on closing, they actually had in stock. And so
PS5s, because I'm still trying to get one of those.
Yeah. I don't even know if those are hitting stores, right? I've heard people having to hit like lotteries and such basically to get them, like buying lotteries to get hold of those.
Newegg's doing that now. But what was interesting is I did see GameStop on Friday put a bunch out there, and they lasted a little while compared to what they have been. But then I went and looked, and they're like twice the price of a standard.
So that's the challenge, right? They're starting to actually get ones that you could not have to wait in line to get the chance to buy. However, they're selling it at a price that people are double taking.
Yeah.
Instead of the instant, oh, screw it, I'm just going to get it. Because when I bought my 3090, I could have bought the 3070 that same day. And I said, I don't want a 3070. And so, but there were 3 3090s there, and I just bought it. And it was at the basically retail price. Not the retail founders, but like the retail aftermarket price. It wasn't blown up. Now, you do that same thing. Like I said, the same card I bought would be $500 or $600 more expensive if it's on the shelf.
Yeah.
That would maybe take me pause, right? That might make me pause and go like, but I saw it when it first came out, and it was $500 less. That's a hard sell. That's my processor, right? That difference is the new processor. Like, anyhow, I don't know. It is a time. Hopefully, shortages will start to minimize. It's not done yet. I've heard a lot of discussion that all this new stuff I talked about that will be coming out is potentially not going to suffer the same shortages we've been seeing, because they're already churning up their dies and their manufacturing processes to do the new versions. So part of what's also aggravating the shortage is some of those things that were producing the old stuff are now starting to produce the new stuff. They're changing over the processing lines. And so we may get fine with the next generation things and have plenty. We may never truly catch up in the current generation. Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, it is time for us to conclude things.
There is, but there was one thing I wanted to do before we called it a day.
Yes, by all means.
So you know how I was saying that Show X has kind of been there from the get-go? would like for you to read the dedication out loud.
Oh boy. Uh-oh. Aw, man. All right. As John then says. For Wayne Adams, a true friend whose support, encouragement, and ideas have been a constant throughout my writing career, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I didn't have anything to do with this book. Come on. Regardless, we're going to let you guys go. Hopefully you had some fun hearing us just kind of catch up a bit there, but also make sure to check out this coming Saturday, the first book of the Chronicles of the Sentinels, Legacy, that will be available on basically all of your purchasing opportunities out there online. You can pre-order it right now, but check it out, pick it up, a whole new series from our friend Jon Wasik, and that we can't wait for you to check out. So thank you both, guys, for coming in and helping me, bring this up for me not just streaming another week of gaming or whatever was going to come off the top of my head on the fly. Give some people some actual content to enjoy. So appreciate you guys for stopping in real quick as you're running around.
Thanks for having us.
And we will catch you guys again. Maybe some deets on what's going on with Show X as a whole. There's going to be some shuffling and stuff going on because, again, everybody got really busy with life. Life happens. And so we'll figure some things out with that, but let you know. All right, we are going to jump out of here, everybody. So you have a good one, and we will catch you again in the future. Bye, everybody.
Goodbye. See you next zombie.